Hashtag release the Snyder Cut, as the saying goes. But which one? Well, that's not really a question anymore. We do know that the one Zack Snyder refers to, which is the one that runs 214 minutes. So, but this most certainly was not the intended theatrical cut that he would have produced for Warner's had he not had to leave the project because of his personal family tragedy. Now, we know that when Joss Whedon came in, it was more than just finishing up what Zack Snyder was doing, because only 10% of his footage even shows up in the film. So this is an entirely different movie that was not just, wasn't really a reshoot at all. This was a new film done under Joss Whedon. And so whatever Zack Snyder was doing would have been a different film there too. I mean, a lot of this response to the idea of a Snyder Cut was that it wouldn't be much different from what you ended up seeing in the theaters. That's just not true. And so whatever elements that Snyder had, how much of it would still conform to his story that he had within the 214 runtime? Could he fashion a story that kept most of those elements intact and keep it at two hours? You know, I guess we'll never know, because whatever version that was is certainly the one he did not finish, and has really no interest to revisit, because if they're going to release the cut, he wants the cut that he ultimately came to. At what point was this the version that, because it was the stories that, they viewed a version of it and declared it unwatchable, you know? Was it the 214 one? Was that the one that he completed more or less? You know, maybe that, like you say, the visual effects wasn't complete and all that sort of thing, but you could follow the narrative of the story with it. And this is what they saw and said, nah, it's got to be shorter or what have you, and we need a lighter tone and all that type of stuff that happened. And you know, and so he had to rework it. It goes all the way back to his admissions that they had the script since Batman versus Superman, and they said, oh, that's too crazy, so they rewrite that. Then he has to work with Jeff Johns, and whatever reasons that was, and he probably had his own interest of other movies they intended to do, and this would change things along the way. Whatever that was, who knows? But initially this would result in a theatrical cut that just never happened, and Joss Whedon takes over, and that's what you get. So we know that from Zack himself that he shot 5 hours in total. So there's 5 hours of footage on this Justice League film, which is, and I think it was Ray Fisher said he had enough footage to make 2 movies. And well, yeah, definitely with that amount. So you have to question about how much of the different story ideas that we've heard was actually at least shot in principal photography. Was the scene of Lois Lane being killed by Darkseid. He admitted this at his SnyderCon deal, and if it was just shot. The only scene that I've heard any mention that he didn't shoot was a scene revealing I forget his name now, the general, that it was a fan theory that he might be the Martian Manhunter, and Zack Snyder confirmed yes he was, and that there would be a scene that would reveal him turning into his true form as the Martian Manhunter, John Jones. So that's the only thing that probably wasn't shot. Everything else, it sounds like he probably did, at least, like I said, the principal photography of it. Could you get Steppenwolf back to his original form as he was seen in the Batman versus Superman scene where Lex Luthor is in there. The full cut, which is the one you should watch and forget about the theatrical. See how this keeps repeating itself. And, would that be put up? Because I've seen there's little leaked footage of the battle with the Atlanteans, and it's very underdeveloped. It's not finished, but it is that version of Steppenwolf fighting with them. Before Aquaman shows up. And how much would it take to go back to that, or would he just go with what was the 214, the one that had the theatrical version of Steppenwolf? It appears to be the case that it's that version of Steppenwolf, because some of the images he's leaked on his Vero account would show Steppenwolf at Star Labs, where apparently there was a scene where Cyborg's father, Steppenwolf, kills his father. So, and it's that Steppenwolf. It's the one you saw in the movie, the Joss Whedon version, I guess. But I mean, Zack Snyder had that version as well. For whatever reason, they wanted it to be this version, and he did not the more monstrous version of Steppenwolf. But there you go. And the Superman in the black suit was something he intended, and that's a nod to the death and return of Superman storyline from the comics. When he initially comes back, or his resurrection, he's in a black and silver suit, and eventually gets back into his blue suit, of course. But and apparently this was something he intended to just to simply change the coloring in the film, where so he's actually wearing the blue and red suit on set, but you could easily change it to where it's you just take the color out. But and that would probably come across a lot better and a lot easier to do than trying to digitally shave his mustache. So if Zack Snyder he was reshooting the film to make it fit that 2-hour frame and whatever changes they needed to make the story fit into it, he would have had to deal with Henry Cavill's mustache too, I imagine. And what he simply, what they should have done was just say, well, why not digitally add a beard as well? And that while he was in the coffin, the hair growth, and he comes out wearing a beard. But I guess eventually he would have to have shots for the ending of it, to where he shaved and he's he's back to being Superman, whatever. But the scene of him taking his shirt off at the end, and like the Christopher Reeve scene of Superman pulling his shirt off, his shirt, reveal the ass and fly off. Apparently Zack Snyder shot that one. So there you go. You got in the can there of him in his original Superman suit and whatnot. And I'm guessing that's more of the happier ending they wanted for the film, when initially Zack Snyder's planning 3 films of Justice League here, where the next one is they decide to bring the war to Apocalypse and they get their butts handed to them, and then the 3rd film is basically the nightmare scene that was seen in Batman vs. Superman, or something along those lines. You're not going to get to that. So I'm wondering, does the 214, does it end with that cliffhanger? And there's other speculation that Darkseid actually appears and wipes them all out, and only the Flash survives, and he travels back in time trying to undo it and this sort of thing. Yeah, well, we just don't know. We don't want to spoil everything. But apparently whatever his theatrical version was is one that we'll probably never see, even if the Snyder Cut gets released, because he's going for the full one that he completed, which is much longer. And probably his thinking, which is not ridiculous, because the same thing happened with Batman versus Superman, where the theatrical version is much, it's shorter and everything, and it's just not very good. The ultimate cut, it's much better. There's flaws, of course, and I readily admit to those. However, it's a more cohesive story. It's more explained and fleshed out, and it just works better. And so he was probably thinking, well, yeah, we'll do this theatrical cut against his better judgment, I'm sure, but the overall cut, that's the one that'll be on the Blu-ray. But well, it didn't work out that way. And when they got in and just basically rewrote the entire film, apparently, to this Joss Whedon version, which it's called the Joss Whedon version, but it's basically Joss Whedon did what he was told. I mean, it's basically the Warner Brothers version, I guess. They didn't want to acknowledge that there was this other version because it it is so vastly different. It's not the same thing as, the Batman versus Superman theatrical version and then the Blu-ray, full director's cut. So they would be two totally different movies, and they just were not going to do that. So, yeah, there you go. So when talks of things are unfinished, I have to wonder if it's more of this theatrical version that Snyder was doing for them and had to leave and didn't finish that, whereas his longer version is more finished than that one was, and so that might be more of the case. Anyway, all of this comes out and is probably more clear and accurate in an article from Screen Rant. I'll have the link description below. I'll give you the link to that, and you can look into that. But it is so. I've often wondered how many versions were done, and he talks about all this. So you could probably cobble up maybe even a third version, because it's like I said, the 5 hours. Yeah, possibly. But he's shooting for this one, this 2:14. That, as far as he's concerned, is the final version of what he did, at least in that narrative that was supposed to be that film. As far as sequels and whatnot, that was something else. And perhaps he did shoot some scenes that could have been utilized for a sequel, but, it just never happened. So, there you go. There was apparently a theatrical version for this, and that is probably more than likely what was really incomplete. So, thank you for watching and listening. Say, why not like and subscribe, and check out that link description below. That'll take you to my mini stores that have plenty of goodies for you. There's also a link to my podcast, The Mr Nailsin Show, on RadioMisfits.com, and, of course, a link to my other video channel over at BitChute. Yeah, that's right, the Mr Nailsin channel at BitChute.com.